Kitty Scanlon. She is assistant professor of the medical surgery unit at a Midwestern University's medical center. That's just a title. I'm an occupational therapist. It's an emerging profession, like medicine was, maybe 100 years ago. We get a heart attack patient. We try to help him find a lifestyle that is satisfying. We had one wealthy man who could see nothing but work. If it meant dying in 3 days, he'd rather die working than live another 15 years in a way he wasn't accustomed to. Some of our patients are death-oriented. A hospital is a dehumanizing institution. People get in and they become arms or legs or kidneys or bladders or something besides Joe Smith, the human being. If a hospital was a good place for people to work, it would meet the patient's needs, and there would be no need for me. The nurses, the doctors, the medical students are set up on a rigid status kind of system. If you buy into this kind of system, you buy the idea that I'm not quite as good as the guy above me. The resident doesn't strike back at the attending man when he has a bad day. He strikes out at the nurse. The nurse strikes out at the hospital aide or the cleaning lady. But many patients tell me the best person for them has been the cleaning lady. Yet the doctors and nurses, everybody is saying that the cleaning lady just does a rotten job. That dirt's been on the floor 3 days. The cleaning lady deals with the patient on a human level. She's scrubbing the floor in the room and the patient says, "My son didn't come to visit me today." The cleaning lady smiles and says, "I know how you feel. I know how I'd feel if my son didn't come to visit me if I was sick." The cleaning lady doesn't see the patient as a renal failure or an ileostomy. She just sees a poor lady who's sick. Until recently, I wasn't sure how meaningful my work was. I had doubts. A surgeon does a really beautiful job that's meaningful to him immediately. But it's not the kind of sustaining thing that makes a job meaningful. It must concern the relationship you have with the people you work with. We get hung up in the competition. Who's responsible for saving this life? Who's responsible for the change in this dying patient? Rather than saying, isn't it beautiful that we all together helped make this person's life better? I worked in the leading rehab hospital in the country. The schedule was very rigid. Everybody punches time clocks when they come to work and when they leave. You get so many minutes for coffee break. The patient's day was regimented as my day was regimented. You have a quadriplegic who at 8 o'clock goes to occupational therapy, 9 o'clock goes to physical therapy, 10 o'clock sees the social worker, 12 o'clock goes back to occupational therapy. We see him as a quadriplegic rather than as a person. We're, both of us, things. That's what happens in hospitals. Not because people are unfeeling or don't care, but because they feel put down. You have to protect yourself in some way. Many things in the institution frustrate me. The doctor who refuses to deal with the patient he knows he's dying. He says he doesn't want to know anything. Or the alcoholic with cirrhosis. What's the use of putting him in the hospital bed, prolonging his life, to send him back to the lonely, isolated world where he'll sit in his room and drink and nobody to cook for him. You know there's no place to send him. Or the old lady who's had a stroke, who lives alone. She's been very dear to all the staff, and you know you can't keep her in that $100 a day bed, and she's shipped to some rotten nursing home that welfare put her into. She can't live alone. And the bastards you have to deal with, sarcastic doctors. They're not really bastards. It's the way the institution makes them. You think, what's the use? For several months, I worked with hemiplegics, elderly people who've had a stroke, half their bodies paralyzed. First thing in the morning, I'd get to the old men's ward and I'd teach them dressing. They didn't think they could do anything, but they could dress themselves. If people can take care of themselves, they have more self-esteem. They were in long wards, and they had curtains around the bed. I'd start out with just the shirt, work on getting the affected arm into the sleeve. Some people it would take 10 days to learn. Some could do it in one day, getting their shirt on, their pants on, how to wash themselves with one hand. The patients taught me a lot. They have better ways they've learned on their own. They'd say, "Wouldn't it be better if I did it this way?" I learned a lot about self-care from them. I try to tell my students to listen to the patients. Being sick can be like going through early developmental stages all over again. It can have profound growth potential for people. It's like being a child again to be sick. And the doctor is like the parent. I've seen it happen with kidney transplant patients. People who've been seriously ill may come out stronger, happier, some kind of learning. Something can happen in the sick role. It's one of the areas where we say it's okay to be dependent as an adult in our society. It's not intellectual learning. I think the luxury of individual patience is coming to an end. And I'm glad. Group treatment is far more effective. Patients I've worked with helped each other much more than I helped them. If I get 5 old men together, hemiplegics, and do some crazy thing like tie a red ribbon on their affected arm, it gets to be a game or a joke. They look at what the other guy's doing. He didn't know he had that side of his body, and say, "Hey, what you're doing is wrong." I could say it over and over and over, and it wouldn't mean anything. They learn about survival from each other. They learn it by discussing what their lives were like, what they're like now. I can't tell them. I don't know what it's like. I've never been paralyzed from the neck down. The kind of thing we do can be done by anybody in a general hospital. It's easy for a nurse to learn how a hemiplegic dresses. If they were able to take time with the patient, they could do what I do. The best I am is a good cleaning lady in medicine surgery. I had so many doubts about my work. I'd think, oh God, the doctor doesn't see what I'm doing as important. I finally learned it didn't matter what he thought. If I believed in what I was doing, I didn't give a damn what the doctor thought of it. I began to see his own protective cover. There was a doctor who thought we were play ladies. Occupational therapy uses crafts, fun things. I thought of it as a loss of status. I saw it as not nearly as important as taking temperatures and all these vital life-saving things. Now I find it exciting, more important than the other matters. I see it as the kind of thing missing in a lot of people's lives. It wasn't the people higher up who didn't recognize the importance of our work, it was I who didn't recognize it. She quit her job for a time and worked as a waitress at a popular neighborhood restaurant. After her return to the medical center, she kept at it as a part-time waitress. It put my life back in perspective for me. I pretend being assistant professor is a big deal. I fell into this status trap because people do act impressed. But I'm no different when I'm waitressing than I am as an assistant professor. They made me quit as a waitress. There's a policy at the university that if you carry 2 jobs, you have to fill out all these forms. I thought, oh hell, it isn't worth it. When I had resigned from the university, I told them I was as great a pain in the ass to them as they were to me. I didn't like this rigidity. You have to be here at 8. It doesn't matter if you stay till 10 at night. If you're 1 minute late, people will think OTs are not dedicated. I told them to go to hell. They liked my fight, so they said, "What will it take for you to stay?" I said, "A leave of absence." I think I've been good at this job and good for my students. But if I'm not good for me, I'm not good for anybody else. They needed me, so they got off my back. When I first took this job, they said I couldn't wear earrings. Only sluts wear pierced earrings. I told them to go to hell. And I said I wouldn't wear the white uniform. Everyone is supposed to wear it. They say, okay, wear a lab coat. I said, I won't wear one. Now the whole staff isn't wearing uniforms. This is very destructive in a status-conscious institution that controls people with these kind of things. Through working on this job, I'm coming to learn that I do have some influence, at least over my own happiness. I could have been here wearing uniforms, fighting, being angry, feeling ridiculous, but helpless. Now I say, the hell with the uniform. And I do wear pierced earrings, and they can't pull them off. I was lucky, or smart, when I challenged them. They gave in. And now I'm learning something of my own power. I do get some mileage out of my title, I hate to admit it. When I'm uncomfortable with somebody new and they ask me what my job is, I make a joke of telling them. But the fact is, I do tell them. It's status, of course. When I'm free of the fear of losing it, I'll be a much healthier person.